Welcome back to Voloco Compression Part 2, where I help you understand the specific settings within a compressor so that you can make your own preset in Voloco. Just to recap, compression is like having a tiny sound engineer inside your equipment who turns things down when they get too loud. This helps us achieve a vocal that has a more consistent level across the board and throughout the song. So let's break down the 5 essential components within a compressor. Number 1 is the threshold. The threshold is the level at which the compression starts happening. It's the dividing line. Anything above the threshold is going to get compressed, and anything below the threshold is going to remain untouched. A low threshold is going to compress more of the audio, and a high threshold is only going to compress the peaks that are going over it. Next is the ratio. The ratio controls how much compression is applied once the sound crosses the threshold. It's basically the strength of the compression. And it's usually expressed as a ratio like 4:1, which means that for every 4 decibels over the threshold the sound goes, the output is only going to increase by 1 decibel. This can get a little complicated, so again, let's just think of the ratio as the strength or intensity of the compression. Next we have the attack. This refers to how quickly the compressor starts doing its job once the sound hits the threshold. So once the sound hits the threshold, if you have a fast attack, it's going to compress the signal right away and compress those initial transients as they're coming through. If you have a slow attack, once the sound hits the threshold, it might let those initial transients get through uncompressed. This can be good for certain types of sounds like percussive vocals or drums or stuff like that. And of course, with an attack, we have the release. Now the release refers to how quickly the compressor lets go of the signal after the signal drops below the threshold again. So how quickly is the compressor kind of releasing its choke on the sound? Now the important thing for me to consider when I do this is I just want to make sure that the compressor is letting go of the signal quickly enough so that when the next part of the sound comes through, it's not still compressing it. I'm letting the compressor go back down to 0, the gain reduction go back down to 0 by the time the next part comes through. Otherwise, when it comes through, it's already going to be compressed. Speaking of gain reduction, the gain reduction is a great way to see how much compression is happening. Sometimes we can't always hear it, so it's good to have a meter to look at to see how much it's happening. So how much is the gain being reduced? Because the compressor is knocking down the peaks, it's reducing the gain. And then finally, we have the output gain. The output gain is really important because, again, the compressor is turning down the peaks of the signal, which is going to lower the overall volume of the signal. So without output gain or makeup gain, you're just going to end up with, yes, a more compressed signal, but a generally quieter signal. There's always this volume knob at the end of the compressor to bring the whole thing back up. Sometimes it's automatic, sometimes it's not, but this is your output or makeup gain. In conclusion, if you're messing around with a compressor and it's hard to hear what these settings are even doing, that's because compression isn't really a natural phenomenon. Our ears aren't really trained to hear it. So you need to mess around with a lot of compressors, you need to mix a lot of vocals before you can really hear a slow attack, a fast release, a high ratio. So I always just encourage people to just turn it up until it's obvious. Turn it up until it's too compressed, and then just back off a little. That's a great way to work with any setting that you're not familiar with. Now, if you can't hear the difference between a fast attack or a slow release and all that stuff, don't feel bad. Compression is a very unnatural concept and your ear is not really tuned to pick it up yet. It's going to take a number of sessions, a number of songs to be able to hear these differences in these settings. So until then, Voloco has given you a number of presets to use depending on the style of your vocal. I encourage you to go in there and just toggle between the different types of compression. Really just make a note of how it's impacting the sound. You'll get the hang of it in no time. And then once you're ready, hit that custom button and you can go in and adjust all of these settings that we spoke about. All right, have fun.